Senator, what do you think about this Pope shakedown?
Well, I enter this debate with a lot of humility as a non-Catholic. But first and foremost, what rings in my ears is the Pope's declaration: I do not fear the Trump administration. And what he's preaching here is essentially peace. In my faith, shalom, peace, is one of the highest values there is. And I admire his moral compass. Obviously, I'm not a Catholic, but we need these pillars of morality in a world that is so tumultuously cast with division and, frankly, immorality. And I think he brings attention to the fact that in this war, lives have been lost. People have been maimed and injured. We talk a lot about the economic cost, Straits of Hormuz, increasing the price of aluminum and fuel and food. But there is a moral principle at stake here.
Senator, I really appreciate you saying there, because you put a really fine point on what I was trying to convey at the beginning there. Because at the end of the day, what the Speaker of the House does not get by his words and what he said is that you can fight a just war unjustly. And that's still morally wrong. And that's exactly what the pontiff is trying to convey. I think your framing of that is consistent with this idea of Augustine, of Hippo. And I think the Augustinian Pope would know a little bit about Augustine, who created the framing around just war along with Thomas Aquinas. So there is this moral code that's in place here. And so I appreciate your acknowledging that, because it's an important piece. I want to get a little bit granular on the politics, though, because I'm really curious as this whole thing is unfolding right now with respect to the War Powers Resolution and the fact that members of my party who would fall all over themselves in the past to require, as they did with George Bush, coming to the Congress and laying out exactly what your plan is for the Iraq War, et cetera, now find themselves sitting in closets and corners with their thumb in their mouth, trying to figure out exactly what the next move would be, waiting on Donald Trump to tell them. So I was curious today to see this go down yet again. The fact that Senator Fetterman seemingly agrees that the Congress has no role here, and that, this concept that, well, we want to support our troops. Well, damn it, that has nothing to do with the War Powers Resolution. The War Powers Resolutions, you can clarify for us, Senator, does not impede on the Defense Department to execute the plan on the ground or in the air or in the sea. What it does say is that the Congress requires the president to account for the actions that he wants to take militarily.
In fact, Michael, I think you're absolutely right. The War Powers Resolution actually supports our troops, because the founders wanted Congress to be required to approve a declaration of war, because they wanted the American people to support troops when they went into war. We should not be putting our sons and daughters in harm's way without the president going to the American people and getting their support. And it's a matter of law, but it's also, again, a matter of fundamental morality and values, which again brings us back to the Pope and other moral leaders in our world. Right now, the American people are very, very much opposed to this war, growing more so by the day. And supporting the troops means we want to save their lives without subjecting them to danger and risk, without a clear objective and strategy and end game.
So today, Senate Republicans largely rejected this War Powers Resolution, what the DNC called writing a permission slip for the president's war of choice. I wonder if you agree with that characterization. But I also want to talk to you about the timeline, because you're joining us on April 15th. Happy Tax Day to you and all who celebrate. Your colleagues, Republican colleagues, are fixated on April 29th as the day when they're finally going to do something. Let me read you some reporting from the Associated Press, and then you and I can talk about it. Senate Republicans reject effort to halt Iran war, but some eye future war powers vote. After the 60-day or 90-day deadline, it's time to fish or cut bait, said Republican Senator Thom Tillis of North Carolina. Senator Lisa Murkowski, Republican of Alaska, has been talking to colleagues about putting together a resolution that would authorize the war beyond that time period. Republican Senators John Curtis of Utah and Susan Collins of Maine have also said they would like to see congressional action. what is supposed to happen in the next 2 weeks? And what is the danger of giving this president 2 more weeks with that permission slip to continue unabated and unchecked by Congress?
Well, we're going to bring back the War Powers Resolution, I hope, next week. We're going to do it again and again and again and again. We're going to hold Republicans accountable. It's more than just speeches on the floor. The American people are going to begin watching. You know, all 3 of you know, having been veterans of this process, that the name of the game is often repetition. And after a certain point, things break through. So this War Powers Resolution is necessary to do now. And fortunately, maybe there'll be more peace talks in Pakistan. Maybe Lebanon and Israel and Hezbollah will have a truce. Maybe the truce that we see, or the ceasefire in Iran, will hold for a little while longer if there are talks. But I can tell you from conversations I've just had with Republican colleagues on the floor of the United States Senate, their patience is fraying. They may not budge on this vote, or maybe even next week. But John Curtis of Utah says he's not going to vote for more funds unless there is a vote on the war. And that view is reflective of a number of others. I never predict what Republican colleagues can do. You and I have talked about in the past. I'm never optimistic, but we're going to hold them accountable through these repeated votes.
You know, Senator, I just want to go back to your point that you made about the founders, because I do think it's a very important one. The framers of our Constitution, they designed a system not actually for a rational leader. They designed a system that took into account an irrational leader. I would argue maybe not as irrational as the one we have right now, but very irrational. James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, they just came from a monarchy. They have seen, they saw what happened when one leader had all of the power to take a country to war based on a personal grievance, impulse, or insult. So this, I'm with the American people out here that are a little frustrated that it seems like everybody else can see very plainly what Congress needs to do here. Yet all of the senators and all of the members of Congress, namely your Republican colleagues, don't seem to see it that way. They are more concerned with their fealty to the president at this point than their duty to the American people and our Constitution.
They're going to begin to recognize the president's taking them down a path that is going to lead to disaster in November. The American people are fed up with the rising prices that they see, and we're facing literally a shockwave in global crisis that is going to send a tsunami of price increases rippling through the world economy.